Chapter 23. When Jonathan woke up, he saw the flickering orange light of a fire. He tried to sit up and found that he was no longer bound. He whirled around and realized that he was no longer in Angelica Sterling's dungeon. He was outside, and he was near a beach. The sound of waves rolling up on the rocks and rushing back into the dark sea reminded him of the shipwreck. The past several days had been quite an ordeal, from finding out that the only way to stop the destroyer meant that humanity was relegated to scrape out survival in a narrow region, to the long and unpleasant trip back that was cut short by a fire demon worshipper assault, to the dungeon of the new fire demon master. Jonathan felt drained. His wrists were sore from being bound, his throat was parched, and his movements were weak. The cold wind carried moisture from the icy sea through the air, and it seemed to pierce through his coat. Jonathan decided that he was alone, and while he was hungry, he decided that warming his numb fingers and toes would be best. Even in the howling wind, the logs in the fire had a healthy blaze. The heat soothed his cold limbs as he rubbed his hands a bit, and then extended his palms toward the fire. "Hey," came a voice from behind him. Jonathan fell over, but tried to get back up as quickly as possible to defend himself. It was Lizard carrying a pack on his back. Jonathan froze in place, unsure of whether he was hallucinating. "Wow, they really got to you, didn't they?" observed Lizard with his familiar air quote gesture. I started Jonathan. His throat burned as he attempted to speak. "Easy," said Lizard. "Victor is on his way, but this will probably help in the meantime." Lizard retrieved a water bottle from his pack and unscrewed the lid. He walked next to Jonathan and held the bottle out to him. Jonathan reached for the water, but it slipped out of his fingers. Lizard caught it with his lightning-quick reflexes. "Sorry," whispered Jonathan. Lizard pressed his lips together, which was as close to a smile as he was capable of offering as he saw Jonathan's pitiful condition. "Here," said Lizard. He held the bottle up to Jonathan's parched lips. Jonathan gulped the cool liquid slowly. "I've also got something else for you," said Lizard. "It's called a Twinkie." He pulled out a small yellow cream-filled cake wrapped in transparent plastic. "Thanks," said Jonathan with a smile. Lizard opened the plastic and Jonathan pulled out the cake and took a large bite. "It's probably not very nutritious, but these things are awesome," said Lizard. Jonathan nodded as the sweet flavor of the cream and cake filled his mouth. Normally he would have savored the sensation longer, but his hunger compelled him to swallow quickly. Crumbs from the yellow cake and small bits of cream rained down as he devoured it. Lizard frowned as he looked at his friend. To say that he had been poorly treated was an understatement. "Where is Kirana?" said Jonathan as he swallowed the last morsel of the cake. As he waited for the response, he licked crumbs out of the dirty stubble on his unshaven face. He was not the sort of man that could grow a healthy beard, and the scattered stubble on his face made him look even sicker than he felt. "She's taking Lucas to meet Victor," said Lizard. "But she was closer to the explosion," said Jonathan in confusion. "Do you mind if I have another drink?" Lizard handed the water bottle to him again, and he took a couple gulps. Though his strength had not fully returned, he felt much better after having eaten something. "So apparently the blast turned her table over, and the wood shielded her from the debris," explained Lizard. "Lucas was not as lucky." "What happened to him?" asked Jonathan with concern. "He took some shrapnel in his torso," said Lizard. "I'm no doctor, but fortunately Victor is." "Then he'll make it?" asked Jonathan. "They were within 100 yards when I came back to check on you," said Lizard. "Let me see." Lizard blinked away, leaving Jonathan alone again for a few moments. He turned again to the fire and warmed himself. He wished that Lizard had left some more food, but he decided it was better to be grateful for the heat. The cold air had worn on Jonathan. "Yeah, he's okay," said Lizard. Jonathan turned again, realizing that Lizard had teleported back. "Good," said Jonathan. "Yeah," agreed Lizard. "It's actually really fortunate that Victor was able to just pick up the Heaven's Breath key after—" Lizard paused as he remembered the betrayal of Daniel Young. "Oh no," said Jonathan as he stood up. "What?" asked Lizard. "My key," said Jonathan. "It was in the dungeon." "Oh, right," said Lizard as he reached into his pack and retrieved a mirrored key. "Kirana grabbed them before we escaped." As Lizard placed the key in Jonathan's hand, it ignited bright flashes of light from Jonathan's eyes and from his key. After a moment, the glow ceased. Jonathan put his key on and tucked it under his shirt. "How did you find us?" asked Jonathan. "Right," said Lizard. "You had been captured by that psycho lady. Well, I eventually found Lucas and Kirana chasing you down. I gave them some supplies and told them that I would watch for Smoke if they needed help from me." "Wait, what?" asked Jonathan. "What supplies?" "I told you," said Lizard. "The explosives." "Oh, by supplies, you meant explosives," said Jonathan with air quotes. "Don't copy my thing," said Lizard in a slightly annoyed tone. "Sorry," said Jonathan. "So Kirana and Lucas apparently got ambushed and were taken to the Psycho," said Lizard. "Of course, that was a part of the plan because they didn't know exactly where she had taken you, and they were worried you were being tortured or something. Looks like you were." "It wasn't so bad for me," said Jonathan, "except I guess they didn't feed me while I was unconscious. Speaking of which, do you have some more of those Twinkers?" "They're Twinkies," said Lizard. "And yes, I have another." Lizard retrieved another cream-filled cake from his pack, opened it, and handed it to Jonathan. Jonathan bit half of the snack cake off and chewed it quickly. "These are really good," said Jonathan. "I know," said Lizard with a smile. "So do we know why these people attacked us in the first place?" asked Jonathan. Small crumbs flew out of his mouth as he spoke and scattered on the ground. "You mean besides the fact they worship demons?" asked Lizard. "Yeah," said Jonathan as he swallowed his bite and jammed the other half of the Twinkie into his mouth. "Not really," said Lizard. "I mean, they've spread out all over the area. The acolytes are grabbing victims wherever they can. Some of them are trained and put in a tournament at a university. Others are just corralled like livestock before they are sacrificed." "A tournament?" asked Jonathan. "Since when did demon worshippers want to host tournaments?" "It's that psycho lady that had you," said Lizard. "She's almost like an augment with her whole survival of the fittest." "That is odd," said Jonathan. "Yeah," agreed Lizard, "but listening in on them hasn't really helped me figure them out. They attacked the government while they were scrambling to deal with the Destroyer, and it looks like they won, but the alliance between the 5 demon masters seems complicated." "There are 5 of them?" asked Jonathan after swallowing his food. "Yeah," said Lizard. "Angelica Sterling is the psycho lady. She's a fire demon worshipper, as you know. Then there's Carson Price, who calls himself the Demon Prophet. Then Miranda Drake, the Death Witch, and Jason Torres, who calls himself Management. And finally Leslie Fisher, the Speed Demon worshipper." "And they're all cooperating with each other?" asked Jonathan. "I thought the demon lords were fairly independent. I mean, at least William Fine was." "I know," said Lizard. "It's weird. Sig wants to stop them." Jonathan smiled. After the tragedy of the Destroyer, it was good to hear that they had real goals besides just getting to the temperate zone. Perhaps there was a silver lining in the events that unfolded after their boat was attacked by fire demon worshippers. "Can you keep an eye on me?" asked Jonathan. I think using the soul key might help us figure out what these demon masters are trying to do." "Are you sure you're up for that?" asked Lizard with a concerned expression on his face. "The only thing you've eaten in days are those Twinkies." "It won't be for very long," said Jonathan. "Plus, I already feel much better." "Yeah, I don't think so," said Lizard. "You realize that the reason you're here instead of with the others is because you are in terrible shape, right?" "I don't think it's a problem," said Jonathan. He stood straight up. Immediately, dizziness forced him to grab the sides of his head and squat back down next to the fire. "I can see your point," said Lizard with a frown. "It didn't look at all like it was a problem." Jonathan wanted to tell him not to be so sarcastic, but instead his stomach knotted up. He fell on his hands and threw up. He coughed and spit, and then breathed deeply for a few moments. Lizard looked around awkwardly, obviously unsure of what to say or do. Finally, Jonathan laughed and spoke up. "So I guess I had one too many Twinkies," said Jonathan. Lizard laughed slightly. "I don't suppose you have anything else." "I can probably find something more," said Lizard. He pulled his pack off and unzipped the main compartment. He rummaged through pistols and ammunition looking for some food. Jonathan smiled as he saw that Lizard had recovered Lucas's shotgun. He wiped his face and scooted next to the fire. He felt dirty and weak, and he was glad that Kirana could not see him. "Jonathan," said Lizard. Jonathan turned and saw Lizard pointing a pistol at him. "Lizard?" gasped Jonathan. "Lizard is under new management," said Lizard with a smile. Jonathan choked as he reached for his key. He was hungry, dizzy, weak, and sick, but he had no choice. He had to defend himself and his friend from the Demon Master Jason Torres. His eyes glowed brightly, but after a moment, he lost consciousness and fell over onto the ground.